You're listening to 89.7 FM, and this is Natascha and the Dialogue. We're interviewing a remarkable person today, as we always do, remarkable men and women. And today we have Peter Baines OAM on the show today. I've been very remiss because I don't often interview men. I tend to often interview women more than men. As obviously, I'm now getting past my fear of interviewing men and discovering that they're actually extraordinarily interesting and really capable. So, Peter, welcome.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.
And I'm terribly sorry that I kept you waiting in the front room for ages. So I'm very thrilled to have you here now. Often people come to the show with quite a diverse background and quite a diverse life, and you are particularly diverse and I think quite extraordinary. So I'm curious, you are a sustainable business leader, but originally you came out of the police force.
That's correct, yeah.
So we've got an interesting so I'm going to go home. I'm going to go back to the beginning. And what was home like for you? What kind of home did you have?
So we grew up in Georges Hall, which is in the western suburbs of Sydney, and I was the middle of three kids, older brother and younger sister. Dad worked really long hours, and we certainly came from what you'd consider a modest family. There wasn't a lot of money, and Dad would leave early in the morning and work 6 days a week and home late at night. Seldom would we see him for dinner, and Mum took care of the three of us and saw us through school. And my parents separated at the age of 13, and for quite a long period after that, I had very little interaction with Dad. And Mum remarried and moved to Queensland when I was just out of high school, and so there was nothing extraordinary about our upbringing.
It's a fairly normal upbringing, actually,
yeah,
today, isn't it? So,
yeah.
So with this normal upbringing, and I'm always curious, and I always ask about the upbringing because I think it often leads into why you become the person that you become and why you do what you do. Was there anything pivotal in your upbringing that kind of pushed you towards becoming a police officer?
No, and even going through school and growing up, I didn't have this desire to join the police. It wasn't an ambition, and I rolled through high school. I got sufficient marks to go to uni, and no one from our family had gone to uni before, so I enrolled in uni, and 6 months in I went, why am I here? What am I studying? I had no direction, and left uni and just started working in retail. And then there was just something in me one day. I thought, wonder what the cops are like. And
oh, goodness me.
And joined. And
little did you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was something that, as I said, wasn't an ambition. It was just something that at the time seemed like a good idea, and I joined and I loved it.
But now, you obviously loved it a lot because you became very, very proficient at being a crisis manager, a police crisis manager for terrorism and also for international crises. So what made you good? What do you think made you great at what you did, and why?
I spent the first 4.5 years in uniform, and 3 years of that was at Cabramatta, and this is back in the 80s, and it was a very busy place, very different to what it is now, and had a very high crime rate. And we spent a lot of time going to domestic situations, domestic violence, and at the time I was in my early 20s and turning up to try and sort out problems for couples who had been married longer than I'd been alive, and felt like that certainly wore thin. And turning up to work in those days where there was only one car working out at Cabramatta, and we would turn up with a list of jobs that were left over from the previous shift.
Oh, my goodness.
And you'd work through them, and you'd finish 8 hours later and hand over your list of jobs that you didn't get to. And I wanted to get out of that. And so I joined the Forensic Services Group and went into the crime scene area as a crime scene investigator.
Okay, listen, everybody out there thinks that this is a glamorous job. I mean, TV has glamorized it to a point where it is supposedly cool. Tell me.
Yeah, it is. It was a very cool job, but the difference between what happened on TV, and it was the speed.
Right.
We would spend days at a crime scene, and then we would the results from the labs would take months to come back, and it was never wrapped up in a 45-minute episode. But that's TV.
It is TV. So obviously, being in the forensic area, you came across the counterterrorism and terrorism initiatives, and then obviously also went out to deal with the tsunamis. So, well, the one which was incredibly pivotal. Why were you part of those? Why would they send somebody like you out to a tsunami? Obviously, forensically, terrorism makes sense to me, but the tsunamis. Why crisis in other countries?
So the timeline of it was that after 9/11 and in New York, and that certainly changed the face of Australian counter-terrorism work, and there was an investment of resources and building of capacity into that. And Australia's first taste really was the Bali bombings in 10th of October of 2002, and I deployed along with a number of other Australian forensic practitioners and criminal investigators to identify. My role over there was to identify those who died and send them home to their families. And the work that the Australians did certainly positioned us that if something else happened in Southeast Asia, would be called upon. And after the Boxing Day tsunami, that's exactly what happened. We were requested to support the humanitarian effort, and that's why we were there in Thailand. There was 5,395 souls who perished as the result of the tsunami, and we were over there to identify as many as we could and send them home, regardless of whatever country they came from. And I spent several months leading both Australian and international teams that were there to identify those bodies and send them home.
Now, I'm going to ask you about the effect that something like this has on you. So, you are a very accomplished person. You have been awarded an OAM. You have been recognized for your work in lots of different areas, which means that you have achieved. You have achieved, and you've come out of these experiences clearly with a positive outlook as opposed to a negative one. But at the same time, I can't imagine that being involved in domestic violence when you're in your early 20s and seeing what people are capable of doing to one another, and then going and being involved in terrorism and seeing sort of an equally senseless act, and then into natural disasters where there's no control. It has to have a very profound effect on who you are. How has that affected you, and how have you coped?
Yeah, it certainly does have an effect, and I think I spent a lot of my policing career with colleagues that I studied through university with, and sadly, there's the vast majority of them are no longer in the workforce, having left through post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's a horrible thing that can creep up on people, and I consider myself incredibly fortunate that for whatever reason I've been able to do what I do, and I haven't. That hasn't affected me in a negative way. As you correctly say, you can't be exposed to what you do. You can't turn up to a beautiful temple in Thailand, walk through the gates, and see 3,500 decomposing bodies on the ground and not be affected. You can't meet the families of those people and not be affected. But it changes you, and for me, I think it's made me a more compassionate person, a more understanding person, and it's probably not those events that brought about the biggest change. And as strange as it might sound, it was the death of one person in Tamworth when I worked as a regional investigator of the forensic area. I turned up at a fatal farming accident, which is quite normal, or sadly not uncommon in the country areas of Australia, and I pulled the sheet back of the body that the ambos had covered him with, and it was a very dear friend of mine and of my family's. And it was my wife's best friend's husband, and their kids and our kids went to school together, and he'd been killed in a tractor accident, and And I ended up doing the investigation and a lot more than what I would normally do in my role, and that was because Louise, Laurie's husband, asked me to do that. And that was a significant turning point for me, because up until that point, death was a constant in what I did every week, whether it was a homicide, a suicide, a fatal accident. And you get to the point where you assume people know why you're there. They know the next step. They know what a post-mortem is. They know the process. And because I'm dealing with it every week, well, of course everyone knows.
Yep.
But dealing with the death of Laurie, what I appreciated was it was such a unique position. And I then, from that, became, I think, so much more compassionate and understanding of the victims. And it was that when I look back at why I did what I did, it was to provide answers. That was the meaning for all I've done and what I continue to do. And the questions to the answers have changed, but I still see what I do as providing answers to families. And I think having that clarity of purpose has helped me with the times when we're in Thailand and you're picking up the bodies of young children, that are dead, and you're stroking their hair out of their face, and you're looking into the innocence of their faces, and that type of thing, it leaves an impact.
It's really impacting. I'm just listening to you and I feel like I want to cry. You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and the Dialogue. And we are interviewing Peter Baines OAM. He is a sustainable business leader, speaker, and ex-police officer who has dealt with massive crisis management across the board. And we are chatting about his life and what makes him a remarkable person. I think when you've been awarded an OAM, I don't need to say that somebody is remarkable. I think then that he has been recognized by the nation as a remarkable human being. Peter, we've been touching on, obviously, the things that have changed you along the way, and the police force and how you've dealt with terrorism and, obviously, international crises. Now, one of the things that you have done because of this, which is fascinating, is set up a charity, an organization called Hands Across the Ocean.
Hands Across the Water.
That's it. I was just talking to you about the ocean.
Yeah, you were
event.
indeed.
And I knew it was Hands Across the Water. So Hands Across the Water, but, everyone knows that the water could be many waters, yes, including the oceans. And this is a pivotal charity that is quite extraordinary because it's not set up like a normal charity where you have costs within that organization. You've raised nearly over 10 million Australian
12 million Australian dollars that we've raised.
That's huge.
It'll be our 10-year anniversary in October this year since I set it up, and I established it after I met a group of 32 kids in Thailand after the tsunami when I was working there, who had all lost their parents and lost their homes, and they were living in a tent. And there was something quite clear to me, was that I couldn't change what had happened, but it felt within my capacity to change what happened next for them.
Absolutely.
So I set up Hands, and the idea was to build a home, and we did that. And I went over and opened the home along with some other supporters, and it wasn't until the opening of the home, and I thought, well, what happens now? And you're big on sustainability, and I go, well, where does the income come from? Where's the sustainable income for them, and what can they rely upon? And it wasn't until I opened it that I thought, well, we've given them a home, but that hasn't gone anywhere near to addressing the questions or the solutions that they require. So then I got serious about Hands, and over the next number of years, we developed a business model which I think is certainly different to a lot of charities, and we don't focus on fundraising. We focus on providing value back to our supporters, be that on a corporate level, a business level, or an individual supporter. So I don't sit and have conversations seeking donations. I seek to build a relationship to give you value back first. And what I know, and has been proven over the last 10 years, if I engage your heart, if I engage your mind and hands, the money will come.
Absolutely.
And if we focus on that side, if we support our donors, our supporters, the outcomes in Thailand is we can bring about amazing change, and which we've been able to do. And that the whole position around the costs it's important to us. It was something that I set up that I was able to fund myself through my leadership speaking and consulting, so I didn't need to draw an income. And that's remained very true to us, that we don't spend donors' money on administration or fundraising. And while it's important to us, I don't advocate that that's the best thing for charity. I don't suggest that's what people should aspire to. It's just the model that works for us. I think what's more important for the charity sector is transparency.
Absolutely.
And the reason that we've been able to adopt that model was I set up a business venture that sits next to the charity that raises money commercially, not through donations, that underwrites our expenses. So we still have expenses. We still employ staff, but they're not paid through donations.
Okay. So you obviously, I mean, I'm curious, you were in the police force, it was massively pivotal, you're no longer there any longer. Why did you decide to leave?
So after working in Thailand, where I spent the most of 2005, I was then invited to apply for an international secondment working for Interpol in Lyon in France on CBRN, which is chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear threats. So for 12 months I looked at the threats and trends that were existing in the international counter-terrorism space and basically wrote a paper for the member countries of Interpol on what the threats and trends were. Out of that, I was then invited to work with the United Nations Office of Drug and Crime throughout Southeast Asia in a capacity building role around leadership and counter-terrorism. And that whole 2 years that I was gone, I was paid by New South Wales Police, but I wasn't working with them. I was only supposed to be gone for 12 months. My secondment was extended a further 2 times, and at the end of that, I had a meeting with my assistant commissioner, and she said, "It's time to come back. You've been gone for too long." And
I returned, went, "Oh, no, I don't really want to go back."
Well, that's exactly what happened. I returned and I said I'd like to take 12 months leave without pay, because at that time, the charity Hands was getting momentum.
Okay.
And I felt that if I walked away from Hands and went back and tried to manage it after work, that it'd end up like a lot of charities and just struggle and not reach potential. So I asked for 12 months leave without pay. My assistant commissioner refused, so I resigned.
Okay. You know, you have to follow your heart in life, and I think what you've developed along the way is a heart path. You know, you've done some phenomenal work, and I'm sure you're not a perfect person. I'd like to know that you're not a perfect person, because it would make me feel so much better about myself. But no, not perfect. You're very quiet. I'm a bit worried now.
I'm thinking there's a line of people I could roll in to advocate that.
So we've got Hands Across the Water, which I've now managed to get right, and you've also then suddenly gone onto this amazing business angle. So we talk about sustainable leadership, and I'm very interested in what that means. Sustainable leadership is a curious title. I could understand certain things out of that, but I'm not sure if that's really what it's about. What is sustainable leadership?
So for us, it's there's multiple levels around it, and it connects into. I finished my second book earlier this year, and it's called Doing Good by Doing Good.
Yes, I would love to know a little bit about what Doing Good by Doing Good really is.
And what that's about is a lot of people, organisations will have a commitment or support to charity or community, and for organisations that's framed up as corporate social responsibility. And in essence, for the vast majority, they carve off a portion of their net profit at the end of the year and give it to charity, give it to community groups. Some will allow their staff to do volunteering, but that's pretty much a sum total for the vast majority of organisations. What I say, though, is that if we can develop relationships and we can build programs that become profit centres back to the organisation, then the pie will grow, then there's more to give away. So it's about creating this sustainability in the relationship, because what happens is if an organisation gives away whatever percentage they decide to carve off each year, when there's a downturn in the economy, when the business struggles, when something happens, they look at cost centres.
And that's what goes.
The first to go is their community commitment, their commitment to charity. Then if the downturn in the economy is brought about their change in commitment, well, guess what? That's when the community needs it the most, because if we're going into a recession or depression, that's when it's needed. And so if we can turn those corporate social responsibilities programs into profit centres, and we can do that through staff engagement, and then we become more attractive as an employer. Our staff retention rates go up. We open up new customers, new business markets. Our brand image improves. The pie grows to give away. And there's a lot of pushback from people who say, well, I don't give to charity to feel good, or I don't give for a benefit back to me. And I go,
I disagree.
Yeah, so do I. But I go, okay.
I think it's impossible.
Well, I do too. But I think that if that's the position they hold, I say to them, okay, well, I'm not going to try and convince you to change that. But I say, well, do it for the benefit of the charity. Because it's in the charity's interest for you as a leader, as a business, as an organisation to be more profitable, because there'll be more to give away. And so there's that level around the sustainable leadership, and then there's what we do in Thailand. So all of our projects, all of the homes that we run, and we have 7 homes, several hundred children under our care. Every home has sustainability attached to it. So whether it's through agriculture, whether it's through manufacturing, whether it's through different products that they make to underwrite the costs, then where we bring the two together is I take leaders, I take business groups 20 at a time on what I call a social venture program. And we go and spend a week in Thailand. We go through the slums of Klong Tui in Bangkok. We spend time with the most remarkable people you could ever imagine. There are people who I will spend my life following in their footsteps, the good that they have done, the remarkable nature of these people. And so that's how I bring the business of sustainability through corporate social responsibility, what we're doing in Thailand, and we bring them together to create this shared experience. And that's where the learning comes.
So when we talk about sustainability, I'm curious. It's an interesting word. I always think that it's unfortunately got some negative connotation. I don't necessarily believe that sustainability is where it stops. I think sustainability is where we begin, and I think regeneration is where we go from sustainability. So sustainability is a neutral position because you're just sustaining, and that's great, and that's better than going backwards. But then from there, I think regeneration sort of begins. And I think what you've done is you've regenerated. You've taken orphans, you've created something that is capable of regenerating over and over again. Sustainability to you, what does it mean? So if I say to you, explain to me what the word means.
And you're exactly right. It has very different meanings for different people. So when we talk about it as a charity, and we were away, took the directors away for a couple of days to focus on this. For last week, we were away for 3 days and spent a lot of time talking about this. And for us, it's in the homes that we run in Thailand, for example, it's creating income-generating activities that can reduce their reliance upon donations. So when we make application to be a registered charity to support an international program, AusAid and so forth, they look at what your sustainability goals are. And we say to them, we want to reduce the reliance upon donations by this percentage, by this amount of time. So we create activities in Thailand that reduces that reliance upon each of the centres. And there's many benefits that come out of that. They create their own market gardens. They develop the capacity and skills within the young men and the young girls that are coming through these centres. There's employment opportunities. But when we talk about sustainability for us as an organisation here in Australia, it's about regular and reliable income. So it certainly has different means. And where you come from in your personal interests, again, it's different once again.
It is, and it's an interesting word, but I think ultimately at the end of the day what it means is that we're trying to create a continuation.
Oh, absolutely.
So we're trying to create things that will continue, and we're trying to move away from being a throwaway society and a society that sees everything in a short term and looks at everything on the long term.
And that's even across where our key purpose is as a charity, as a group. It's not about building the homes for the kids that we currently have. We've done that, and we've done that well. But the biggest change for us is the generational change that we can bring about. And we're seeing that now, where that long-term investment brings about long-term change. So we've got kids who came to us, and one boy in particular, his name is Game. He came to us at the age of 12, had lost his parents, was living with his auntie. His auntie had lost her husband. There was no income for them, no government support, no foreign aid. She said to Game, you'll have to leave school and go and work at the age of 12. And she pulled him out of school, went to the school to say this is what was happening. School saw the potential in him and what a travesty it would be. They contacted us and said, could he live with you? We said, of course. He moved in. Didn't mean he was separated from his auntie, but we took care of his costs. He was returned to school at the age of 12, where he should be. He was allowed to finish secondary school, went on, completed high school, enrolled in university, and in January this year I was with him when he graduated with a law degree from Phuket University.
I have goosebumps. That is amazing.
And now I speak to him and you say, what do you want to do? And his goal now is to go back to university to do a master's degree in psychology. And I said, why? And he said, I want to support the community and help the community that's helped me. So what we've done is there's a generational change there, because this will flow on to his children. Because if he was working in a rubber plantation, those who would be within his inner circle or within his ecosystem would be people within that area. Now, where because of the education he's had, the opportunities he's had, where he'll travel and the world is his oyster, he will marry, and his children will have very different aspirations than what they would have otherwise. That's sustainability for me.
That's incredible. We've come to the end of the interview. It always goes so fast. It's been such a pleasure. Such a pleasure. I could talk to you all day about some amazing stuff and pick your brain. Thank you so much
My
for
pleasure.
being here. We've been talking to Peter Baines OAM. This is The Dialogue with Natascha Moy on 89.7 FM. We will be back in 2 weeks with another incredible interview. Oh my goodness, I can't believe they left Peter Baines sitting in the reception area for 20 minutes. He almost left.